So, Samir, tell me a little bit about the first company you started with Runic and how was that experience?
Yeah, so the first company we started was this company, we called it Nix Development. It was like our app development company where we built apps and primarily for small and medium-sized businesses. And that transitioned as Runic got this research opportunity at MIT CSAIL doing AI research into a platform called Syscat, which we would use like AI to automate app development. The whole vision was, how do we like create modularized code so you can type in an idea? So like, I want my app to do these 10 things and have these features and look like this. And it would be a platform that would basically take all those inputs and turn it into an app, right?
That's a cool idea.
Similar in some sense to Vise, where you type in a number of portfolio inputs and it would turn it into a portfolio, which was a nice groundwork. But as we were working on this, we didn't realize how challenging a technical problem it was. We saw the vision, we saw how exciting it could be. We painted a picture of what the future looked like, but we didn't realize the depth, the magnitude of the technical problem behind what we were doing. And I think we were 13, 14 at the time, and we realized, okay, we need to get someone to help us build this. We need to find developers and find engineers who can like build this, that have like domain expertise. So we hit the internet and we just started pushing job ads everywhere, and going on different websites. And I collected an interesting group of people.
What were the job ads? What were the jobs you were looking for?
I was looking for a software engineer, for a COO, a CFO, a chief strategy officer. Like, we were very top heavy. It was a concern for sure. But I ended up recruiting an interesting group of people together. So we started working on this and we were able to ship our first MVP. And there was one of the big barriers that kind of set us back 6 months, which is a big problem, is that in order to, like, we were making money. So from our early app development company, like we made, I think probably $30,000, and all that money was sitting in a PayPal account. But that PayPal account couldn't really be used, like, unless we were doing like P2P transactions, paying a contractor or a freelancer to help us with something, whether it be design or otherwise. But we didn't have a debit card. My parents wouldn't let me get a debit card. They would not let me get any kind of form like to spend my money, because they didn't want me spending my money. They thought I should save it for a long time. So they wouldn't let me get a debit card. And because they wouldn't let me get a debit card, it was so hard to like make purchases on behalf of the business. So we had to come up with all these creative ways. We would go to CVS and buy these prepaid gift cards and try and basically get them to, I had like probably a stack of 100 of them, to finance the whole business in the early days. And we ended up spinning our wheels on this business for about a year and a half. And there was this conference in San Francisco that it was at Plug and Play Tech Center. And I got a cold email from this conference. I created an AngelList profile. They saw my AngelList profile and they were like, we think you should come present at our conference and pitch all these investors. And like, investors were like my superheroes back then. Like, I thought that if there's some way I can get an investor to give me money to like work on my dreams, like that was the coolest thing in the world. So went to San Francisco. I convinced my parents over months. I was like, you guys got to let us fly out to San Francisco. And they're finally like, okay, you, Runic, and your grandma can all go together to San Francisco and go to this conference. So it was the three of us. We went to this conference, and over the period of time, I convinced all of these people that we worked with to fly and meet us in San Francisco. And the chief strategy officer took a bus all the way there. It was a 3-day bus ride. And the other guy came from London, and the other guy came from Arizona. And we all met at this, Italian restaurant in the Tenderloin. And we realized very quickly this wasn't the group of people we should be working with. And Runic and I had to make a tough decision. We were walking, we did our pitch. That day, later that day. And, we realized like how crazy these people we were that worked with. And we're like, okay, we have to do this pitch on our own. And we thought that no one would take us seriously because we were kids, right? And like, it was going to be powerful to have 2 adults in the room that could pitch with us. What we realized was Runic and I did such a great job at the pitch, talking about our vision and creating this great presentation. We practiced for hours, for days in advance. And investors came up to us and they're like, that was like out of 100 pitches, that was better than 99 of them. That was like one of the best pitches we'd ever heard. And Runic and I were pumped. We're like, we can do this on our own. We're the secret sauce here. We don't need these people. And over time, we ended up meeting this investment banker who was like, look, you guys seem to know so much about AI and machine learning. There's these consulting projects that I'm working on with these large investment banks. You guys should help, basically consult with me and consult with these investment banks. She started consulting with investment banks like Mass Mutual and RBC Royal and Deutsche Bank.
And that was while you were on parallel working on the app development project?
We started to transition off of that. It was on parallel, and then we ended up getting Justin to consulting. We started making so much money.
Why did you decide to transition off that project?
We felt like building apps manually weren't the way to do it. It was such a time-consuming, difficult, and not very profitable business. And then when we couldn't do it with technology, when we couldn't build our startup, when we couldn't build Syscat, we realized like our kind of hopes were destroyed. And it was the first time we like really gave up, the first time we quit. And we had the sparks for what Vise would become. And we started consulting with these investment banks and then realized what Vise really could become. And we came up with this. And then we decided we made two promises to ourselves. The first one was we wouldn't quit until we graduated high school and it truly wasn't working, which was kind of 3 years out. So we were given at least 3 years, and we would try and bootstrap the whole thing ourselves because no investor was willing to give us money. We tried for the first company. We tried a little bit in the beginning for Vise, and we realized, we're just going to build this company and own it ourselves and, raise no money. So by doing that, we, had to sink a lot of time into it.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell me more about when you said no investors were willing to give you more money for the first company or early on Vise.
So during this whole process, I always thought like investors would solve our problems and that we were so good at execution because we were able to convince all these people to work for us for free and, we built 5 versions of Vise and we built a couple versions of our prior company, fully bootstrapped, having spent less than $30,000, right? So we figured if we were able to do this much with $30,000, imagine what would happen. I think we added up all of our potential expenses. We weren't accounting for payroll or anything like that, payroll, other top line expenses. But we figured it would be like $750K is like what we needed. That was our dream number. And with that $750K, we'd be able to turn into $1 billion. That was not the case. It was very not true. But we thought that if we were able to do this much with 30K, imagine how much we'd be able to do with close to $1 million. But during this whole time, like I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, there aren't like wealthy people there that could give us money. And I'd always try and hit different people up for money and everyone would say no. But I realized, the power of cold emails and the power of just cold outreach. So I created a Twitter profile, I created a LinkedIn profile, I created, just tons of different drafts of emails, and I would just spam people. So I watched this Jason Calacanis, This Week in Startups. That guy was my hero back then. And I would send him 100 emails like a week. Like I would just click send. I would be sitting in class sending emails to investors. And occasionally I would get demand emails from people telling me to stop when I wasn't getting through the spam folders. And then twice I got on the phone with an actual investor. They're like, okay, I'm willing to talk to you. The first time was this firm called China Rock Capital. And I get on the phone with China Rock Capital and I'd prepared for 2 weeks prior to this meeting. I had researched everything about his portfolio, everything about this guy. I knew everything. And I got on and it was 25 minutes long. And then I was like, hey, I'm this 14-year-old kid. I'm doing all this stuff. And he was like, look, come back to me in a couple of years when you've got stable, predictable revenues and we can look at this deal and keep me informed. So I would keep this guy. This is a venture for his dream. I would email him every 6 weeks with a progress update on the business, how it's going, what's going on. And it never ended up going anywhere, but I think that that was a really exciting moment for us.
How many no's do you think you got before your first real set of investors?
Thousands, hundred, like probably. I mean, I would do this every single day. I would do two things. I would reach out to engineers and I would reach out to investors. I had much more success with engineers than I did with investors. And I would do it during class. I would sit in class. I hated school. I would sit in class and just do this all day long. And I probably got, I mean, I reached out to probably everyone and I got no's from literally everyone for years. I would say our hardest money to ever raise was the first $10,000. When the guy who was my landlord at my co-living house in San Francisco, I convinced him over a while to give us our first $10,000, and that was the hardest money we've ever raised.
Wow. What kept you going?
This vision that building this company would, give us freedom, it would give us control, and it would be able to do something really meaningful in the world. We would be able to build something that would change a really important industry and, like guide our own ship. And I think that that vision just stuck in our minds every single day. And like without that vision, we wouldn't have been able to, and without that feeling that, that knowing that doing this was, what truly brought us happiness and it was like what we love to do. And this is like what we wanted to spend all of our time on more than anything else, was able to kind of lend itself to grit. And we knew that like we wouldn't give up and like we would be relentless. And like this was the one thing we had to commit ourselves to. And I think, grit wins out in the end.
I love that. Samir, thank you very much for sharing that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.